In the 182nd District Court, there was an altercation involving a defendant in the court, and there was a fracas that involved the defendant, two prosecutors, the bailiff of the court, and even the judge was assaulted as well.
What did the defendant do?
Well, what occurred was the defendant was brought up to the bench by the judge, and the judge was asking him some questions, and the defendant became obstructive and argumentative with the court and created a disturbance in the courtroom. The judge, realizing that what he had here was a failure to communicate, and so he instructed the bailiff of the court to escort the defendant into the holding cell as he revoked his bond, at least momentarily, during the proceedings, because he was creating a disturbance in the court, and so they had to go on with court proceedings. At which point, as the bailiff, a female bailiff, deputy sheriff, attempted to escort the defendant to the holding cell, she was attacked by the defendant and assaulted, and then at which point the two prosecutors intervened to try to subdue the defendant in this improper conduct, as well as the judge himself came off the bench to try to maintain order and to subdue the defendant. And as a result, both the female deputy sheriff, the two prosecutors, and the judge all sustained minor injuries as a result of this improper assault by the defendant in the courtroom. The district attorney's office is filing 3 assault on a public servant cases against the defendant, and we will take this matter up in a timely manner in the future.
What is the defendant's name?
Joseph Caterina.
Spell it, please.
He has a Louisiana spelling. Catarineau, first name Joseph.
What was he in court for initially today?
He was in court for charges of filing false financial instruments, mechanic liens, I believe, against American Airlines in a illegal manner, and it's a consumer fraud type case. It's a paper case. It doesn't involve violence, so it came as a surprise to everybody involved that this fracas ensued.
Did he punch, hit? How would you characterize what he did to the...
My understanding is that it did occur, that he punched and hit the deputy sheriff as well as the prosecutors, and the judge was also punched by the defendant.
Why was the defendant not in handcuffs? Was he?
He was on bond. He was on bond.
He was on bond.
It was just brought up. It was this fairly routine procedure. The judge was just asking him some questions, and this occurred.
So the bailiff was taking him back to a holding cell. Why a holding cell if he was...
Because he had created a disturbance in the courtroom, which the judge couldn't tolerate.
So was he going to be held in like contempt of court at that point? Or?
At that point, I don't think it had risen to that level. Probably after some sober reflection, he could have come back and communicated with the court in a proper manner, and probably everything would have been fairly, normal. But instead, this fight ensued, and it's just intolerable that this is occurring in a court of law.
Can you also reiterate what kind of agitated the situation? How did it go from being a regular court hearing to him being them attempting to escort him back out?
Well, he began to argue with the judge, and as I say, commenced creating a public disturbance, and there was really no good basis for it in my view. Now, I was not a witness to it, but I have talked to the participants. And it was just improper conduct by an individual charged with criminal behavior. It's not unprecedented in our courts. It does point out a matter that the higher authorities over in Commissioner's Court need to take a look at, and that's the security in our courtrooms. There needs to be adequate resources and funding to make sure that everybody that's involved in the criminal courts have their security maintained. And so I do think that's an issue that the Commissioner's Court should take a look at to determine whether or not we have adequate security at this point.
How ultimately was he subdued? Was there a taser involved?
There was a taser involved. One of the several deputies also intervened once it became known that a fracas was occurring in the 182nd. They came in with a taser, and unfortunately one of our prosecutors got kind of a secondary shock because he was holding on to the defendant at the time of the tasing and received a shock as well. It's kind of like friendly fire.
What happened afterwards? Was the court cleared out?
I don't believe the court was cleared out. The defendant.
Not the courtroom, 182nd.
I don't believe the courtroom was cleared out. There was necessary force used to subdue the defendant and put him in the holding cell, and then the court proceeded with its business.
Could you talk about how unprecedented, if that's a word you might use, or how unusual this is?
Well, this is not unprecedented. This sort of behavior has occurred in the past. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's not unprecedented. And we always have to bear in mind when you're in criminal court, it involves individuals charged with criminal conduct.
But you didn't see it coming from this type of defense?
No, that's a little unusual. Typically, if an individual is going to engage in violence, they have a history of violence.
We were hearing something about a sovereign citizen. Can you say anything about this defendant's comment?
Yes, my understanding is that the defendant in this matter was raising the issue with the judge that he was some sort of sovereign citizen of some other entity other than the state of Texas. And so you could see how a lengthy conversation of that topic would interfere with the court's proceedings. And the judge couldn't tolerate that. And so he took the necessary steps to have the defendant removed to the holding cell so the court could continue with its business.
Is he defending himself, it sounds like?
He was attacking.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Was he representing himself in court?
Yes and no. It's my understanding he had one attorney that was attempting to withdraw from his case, and that was the reason the judge was calling him up to the bench to determine whether or not he had the necessary funds to be able to hire another attorney or whether or not the court needed to appoint an attorney. These are legitimate questions by the judge and fairly standard and routine. And for reasons that are unknown to me and mystifying, frankly, the defendant took great umbrage at that, and that's what precipitated this altercation.
So this was a court hearing over his representation today, or was it a court hearing about something else?
No, I don't know if it rose to the occasion of a hearing. It was a conference at the bench with the defense attorney that was attempting to withdraw from the case, the prosecutor that was assigned to the case, and then the defendant was brought up by the judge to discuss what the future proceedings would be, as he would need to have an attorney because his case was set for trial on the 10th of January 2022.
Where's the defendant now?
It's my understanding the defendant is now in the Harris County Jail.
And the status of, I know you said those were minor injuries. Do you expect everyone to be okay?
I do expect everyone to recover from this, but it's a very disturbing set of facts.
Was there any video of the incident?
To my knowledge, no. They do have Zoom facilities in the courtroom, but as far as I know, I've not been given to understand that they have this on film. That I just don't know.